He thought he was untouchable. Officer Bryce Harlan had a reputation for getting results, usually by planting evidence on people who could not fight back. One rainy night, he saw a luxury car with a black woman behind the wheel, and he smiled. He saw a victim. He saw a career-boosting arrest. He pulled her over, planted a bag of cocaine under her seat, and dragged her to jail in handcuffs while laughing in her face. He thought he had ruined her life. But when he walked into the precinct briefing the following day, the blood drained from his face. The woman he had framed was not just a victim. She was wearing a white shirt with gold bars. She was his new captain, and she had recorded everything. This is the story of the worst mistake of Bryce Harlan's life. The rain hammered against the roof of the patrol cruiser, a rhythmic drumming that usually lulled Officer Bryce Harlan into a trance. But tonight he was wired. He was short on arrests for his monthly quota, and the pressure from Sergeant Elias Brock was mounting. The 4th Precinct in Chicago was not known for its leniency. You either produced numbers or you were put on desk duty, the rubber gun squad. Bryce, a 6-year veteran with a chip on his shoulder the size of a boulder, had no intention of riding a desk. He sat idling in his Ford Explorer Interceptor, hidden in the shadows of an underpass along Western Avenue. His eyes scanned the traffic, ignoring the speeders and the ones with broken taillights if they looked like they had lawyers on retainer. He was hunting for something specific: vulnerability. Then he saw it. A sleek, charcoal gray Mercedes-Benz E-Class glided past. It was a recent model, expensive and clean. The windows were tinted, but the street lamps caught the profile of the driver as she passed. A black woman, young, maybe early 30s, alone. Bryce shifted his gum to the other side of his mouth and threw the cruiser into drive. "Gotcha," he muttered. He did not turn his lights on immediately. He tailed her for several blocks, running her plates. The computer came back clean. Nadia Brooks. No priors. Vehicle registered to owner, Nadia Brooks. Bryce scoffed to the empty car. Probably a girlfriend of some dealer driving a car she did not pay for. It was a narrative he had spun 100 times. In his mind, people like her did not drive cars like that legally. Not in his district. He flicked the switch. The red and blue lights exploded into the rainy night, reflecting off the wet asphalt like neon blood. Ahead, the Mercedes signaled immediately and pulled over smoothly to the curb. No hesitation. No swerving. A textbook stop. That annoyed Bryce. He liked it when they ran. It justified what came next. He took his time getting out, adjusting his belt, touching the butt of his Glock 19 out of habit. He put on his hat, shielding his eyes from the downpour, and strutted to the driver's side window. He tapped the glass with his flashlight. Hard. The window rolled down. The interior smelled like new leather and vanilla. The woman behind the wheel was calm. Too calm. She wore a simple beige trench coat over a white blouse. Her hands were visible on the steering wheel at 10 and 2. "License and registration," Bryce barked, skipping the pleasantries. Nadia Brooks turned her head slowly. Her eyes were dark, intelligent, and completely devoid of fear. That irritated him. Fear was the currency he dealt in. If they were not afraid, he could not control them. "Is there a problem, officer?" Her voice was steady, articulate. "License and registration," he repeated louder this time. "Do you know why I pulled you over?" "I was going 35 in a 35. My tags are current. My lights are functional. So, no, officer. I do not." Bryce leaned in, letting the rain drip from his brim into the car. "You failed to signal a lane change back on 5th. Erratic driving. Step out of the vehicle." Nadia's brow furrowed slightly. "I signaled. I have a dash cam, officer. It records interior and exterior." Bryce froze for a microsecond, but his arrogance steamrolled over his caution. Dash cams could be lost. Files could be corrupted. It happened all the time. I said step out of the vehicle now. His hand dropped to his taser. I smell marijuana. It was the oldest lie in the book, the magic phrase that bypassed the Fourth Amendment. The smell of weed gave him probable cause to search the car without a warrant. Nadia stared at him for a long beat. She knew exactly what he was doing. She slowly unbuckled her seatbelt and opened the door. She stepped out into the rain, standing nearly as tall as him in her heels. Turn around. Hands on the hood, Bryce commanded. He patted her down, rougher than necessary, hoping for a reaction, a flinch, a curse word, anything he could use to tack on a resisting arrest charge. But she was a statue. Stay there, he spat. Bryce dove into the driver's side of the Mercedes. He made a show of looking around, tossing papers from the glove box, opening the center console. He needed to be quick. He reached into his own tactical vest pocket. His fingers grazed the small plastic baggie he kept there for emergencies. A gram of white powder, enough for a felony possession charge. With a practiced sleight of hand, he slid the baggie under the driver's seat, then immediately discovered it. Bingo! Bryce shouted, emerging from the car with the baggie held up in the beam of his flashlight. What's this, Nadia? A little party favor. Nadia turned her head. She looked at the baggie, then at Bryce's face. A small, cold smile touched her lips. It was not a smile of submission. It was the smile of a predator watching prey walk into a trap. That is not mine, she said softly, and you know it. Tell it to the judge. Bryce spun her around, slapping the cuffs on her wrists. He tightened them until they bit into her skin. You are under arrest for possession of a controlled substance. You have the right to remain silent. As he shoved her into the back of his cruiser, she spoke one more time. Officer, what is your name and badge number? Officer Harlan, he sneered, slamming the door. Badge 492. Don't forget it. I won't, Nadia whispered in the dark back seat. I really won't. The ride to the 4th precinct was silent. Nadia did not cry, did not beg, did not ask for a lawyer yet. She just watched Bryce through the plexiglass divider. Her silence was starting to crawl under his skin. Usually by now, they were screaming about their rights or crying about their kids. When they arrived at the station, Bryce dragged her out. He paraded her through the booking area like a trophy hunter. The precinct was buzzing with the night shift transition. Phones were ringing. Drunks were singing in the drunk tank, and the smell of stale coffee and floor wax hung in the air. What you got there, Harlan? Sergeant Elias Brock asked from the desk. Brock was an old-school cop, heavy-set with a mustache that had seen the 80s and never left. He was part of the boys' club, the clique that protected their own. Possession, Bryce announced loudly, dropping the baggie onto the booking desk. Found it under the seat of a fancy Mercedes, another high-class user thinking she owns the road. Brock chuckled, eyeing Nadia up and down. Looks like you picked the wrong night to go for a drive, sweetheart. Nadia stood tall, the fluorescent lights reflecting off the handcuffs. I would like to make my phone call, Sergeant. You will get your call when we process you, Brock grunted. Name? Nadia Brooks. Occupation? Nadia paused. She looked around the room. She saw the peeling paint, the overflowing trash cans, the lack of discipline among the officers. One was asleep at his desk. Another was playing a game on his phone. Civil servant, she replied vaguely. Civil servant? Bryce laughed, shoving her toward the fingerprint scanner. What? You work at the DMV? You afford that car stamping licenses. He grabbed her hand to press her thumb onto the glass. She did not resist, but her hand was firm. You are hurting my wrist, Officer Harlan, she stated. This is excessive force for a compliant suspect. I will show you excessive, Bryce muttered, pressing harder. Once she was printed and her mugshot was taken, a photo where she held her chin up with defiant dignity. Bryce led her to the holding cells. He chose the one at the far end, the one with the draft and the flickering light. "Get comfortable, Princess," Bryce said as he unlocked the bars. "You are going to be here a while. Bail hearing is not until tomorrow afternoon." Nadia stepped into the cell. It smelled of urine and despair. She turned around before he could close the gate. "Officer Harlan," she said, her voice cutting through the noise of the station. "You planted evidence on me. You violated my civil rights. You profiled me based on my race and my vehicle." Bryce laughed, a harsh barking sound. He leaned his face against the bars, inches from hers. "It is your word against mine. And guess what? I wear the badge. I am the law in this town. Nobody believes a junkie over a decorated officer." "Decorated?" Nadia raised an eyebrow. "Is that what you call it? I would check your file. 3 excessive force complaints in the last 2 years. 1 suspension for conduct unbecoming. You are not decorated, Harlan. You are a liability." Bryce's face went red. "Who the hell do you think you are?" "I am the person who is going to end your career," she said calmly. "Shut up." Bryce slammed his nightstick against the bars. The loud clang made the other prisoners jump. "One more word and I put you in solitary." He stormed off, adrenaline pumping. He felt good. Powerful. He went back to his desk, high-fiving Brock. "Feisty one," Brock said, chewing on a donut. "She actually thinks she's going to beat it." "Let her think whatever she wants," Bryce said, kicking his feet up on the desk. "She is just another stat." He went outside in the rain to smoke. He texted his girlfriend. "Got another one. Big bust. Promotion soon, babe." He had no idea that inside the cell, Nadia Brooks was not sleeping. She was sitting on the concrete bench, eyes closed, memorizing every detail of the last few hours. She was not waiting for a lawyer. She was waiting for justice. The sun rose over Chicago, gray and dreary, matching the mood inside the 4th precinct. The morning shift briefing was the most important time of the day. It was when the new orders came down and when the commander chewed everyone out. But today was different. The precinct was buzzing with rumors. The old captain had retired recently. Today, the new captain was arriving. Nobody knew who it was yet, only that they were coming from outside the district, transferred in from internal affairs or some special task force. Bryce walked into the briefing room, holding a steaming cup of coffee, feeling like a king. He had his arrest report filed. He looked sharp in his uniform. He sat next to his partner, Officer Vance. "Heard you bagged a Mercedes last night," Vance whispered. "Yeah, easy pickings," Bryce bragged. "Some attitude problem with a bag of snow. She's cooling off in cell 3. "Good work," Vance nodded. "Maybe the new captain will be impressed." "I hope so," Bryce grinned. "I am gunning for Detective Shield this year." Sergeant Elias Brock walked to the front of the room. "All right, settle down. Listen up." The room went quiet. "As you know, Captain Harlan is gone. Command has sent us a replacement. She comes highly recommended from the 12th District where she led the anti-corruption task force." Bryce felt a slight prickle on the back of his neck. Anti-corruption? That was not good. Those types were usually sticklers for paperwork. "She is known for being tough, fair, and no nonsense," Brock continued. "She wants to meet everyone immediately. So look alive." The door to the briefing room opened. A hush fell over the room. The commissioner himself walked in first. This was a big deal. The commissioner never came to roll call unless it was serious. "Morning, officers," the commissioner said, his voice booming. "I am here to personally introduce your new commanding officer. She is one of the finest officers I have ever had the privilege of working with. A woman who worked her way up from patrol, served in vice and narcotics, and spent the last few years cleaning up the 12th. The commissioner stepped aside. "Officers, meet Captain Nadia Brooks." For a second, Bryce's brain did not process it. He heard the name Nadia Brooks and it sounded familiar, but he could not place it. He was expecting a stranger. Then she walked in. She was wearing the pristine white shirt of a captain, gold bars on the collar. Her badge shone under the lights. Her hair was pulled back in a tight professional bun. She looked impeccable, powerful. Bryce blinked. He rubbed his eyes. It was her. It was the woman from the car, the woman from the holding cell. The room started to spin. The coffee in his stomach turned to acid. He looked at her face, praying it was a twin, a coincidence, a hallucination. Captain Brooks walked to the podium. She did not look at notes. She looked out at the sea of blue uniforms. Her eyes scanned the faces. Brock, Vance, the rookies, and then her gaze stopped. She locked eyes with Officer Bryce Harlan. The silence in the room was deafening. Bryce felt like he was naked. He could not breathe. He wanted to slide under his chair and disappear into the floor. Captain Brooks let the silence hang for a long, uncomfortable moment. She held his gaze until Bryce was forced to look away, sweat beading on his forehead. "Good morning," she said, her voice the same steady, articulate tone from the night before. "I have heard a lot about the 4th Precinct. I have heard you are tough on crime. I have heard you get results." She paused, walking slowly around the podium. "But I have also heard rumors. Rumors of shortcuts. Rumors of profiling. Rumors of officers who think the badge gives them the right to be judge, jury, and executioner." She stopped right in front of Bryce's row. "Let me be clear," she said, her voice dropping an octave, deadly serious. "I have zero tolerance for dirty cops. If you are honest, I will back you to the gates of hell. But if you abuse your power, I will hunt you down and I will take your badge." She looked directly at Bryce again. A small, cold smile touched her lips. The same smile from the car. "Officer Harlan," she said. The whole room turned to look at Bryce. "Yes, Captain," Bryce squeaked. His throat was dry as sandpaper. "I believe you have a prisoner in holding cell 3, a woman arrested last night for possession." "Yes, Captain." "Release her immediately and bring the evidence bag to my office. We need to have a talk about chain of custody." "But Captain," Bryce stammered, "that woman is me." Nadia finished for him. The room gasped, a collective intake of breath that sucked the air out of the room. "Excuse me?" Brock asked, bewildered. "Officer Harlan arrested me last night." Nadia addressed the room, her voice rising. "He pulled me over without cause. He planted cocaine in my vehicle and he denied me my rights. I decided to let the scenario play out to see exactly how this precinct operates." She turned back to Bryce, whose face was now a mask of pure terror. "My car was my personal vehicle. The cocaine was baking powder I keep in a baggie for this exact integrity test. But you did not test it, did you, Harlan? You just assumed." Bryce could not speak. He was shaking. "My office. 5 minutes," she commanded. "Dismissed." She turned on her heel and marched into the captain's office, the door slamming shut behind her. Bryce sat there frozen. The other officers moved away from him like he had a contagious disease. He looked at Brock for help, but the sergeant just shook his head and looked away. The hunter had just become the prey. The walk from the briefing room to the captain's office felt like a walk to the gallows. The precinct, usually a cacophony of ringing phones and banter, had fallen into a hush. Every pair of eyes followed Bryce Harlan. He could feel their judgment. Not because they morally objected to what he did. Many of them had bent the rules before, but because he had been stupid enough to do it to the boss. In the police world, incompetence was a greater sin than corruption. Bryce knocked on the frosted glass door. His hand trembled, a subtle vibration that rattled the glass in the frame. "Enter!" Nadia's voice came through, sharp and clear. Bryce pushed the door open. The office was spacious, smelling of lemon polish and old paper. Nadia was sitting behind the large oak desk that had belonged to the previous captain for years. She looked entirely at home, framed by the window that overlooked the gray Chicago skyline. On the desk, in the center of the green blotter, sat the plastic baggie of white powder Bryce had planted the night before. "Sit," she said, not looking up from a file she was reading. Bryce sat in the wooden chair opposite her. It was lower than her chair, a psychological trick the previous captain had used, and one she evidently decided to keep. He folded his hands in his lap, trying to stop them from shaking. Nadia flipped a page, then another. The silence stretched for a full 2 minutes. The only sound was the ticking of the clock on the wall and the distant wail of a siren. Bryce felt sweat trickling down his spine, soaking into his undershirt. Finally, she closed the file. She looked at him, her eyes unreadable. "Do you know what this file is, Officer Harlan?" she asked, tapping the folder. "No, Captain," Bryce whispered. "It is your personnel file. I spent the last few hours reading it. It is illuminating." She leaned back, steepled her fingers. 27 arrests for possession in the last 18 months, a remarkable clearance rate. And in 90% of those cases, the body camera footage was either corrupted, lost, or the camera was malfunctioning at the critical moment of discovery. Bryce licked his lips. "Technical issues, Captain. The equipment is old. We have been asking for upgrades for years." "Is that so?" Nadia picked up a remote control and pointed it at the large flat-screen TV mounted on the wall. "Let us watch something together." The screen flickered to life. It was footage from a high-definition dash cam. The angle was wide, showing the interior of the Mercedes and the rainy street outside. The audio was crystal clear. "Officer, what is your name and badge number?" Nadia's voice from the video filled the room. "Officer Harlan, badge 492. Don't forget it." Bryce watched himself on the screen. He looked arrogant, sloppy. He watched as he shoved her into the cruiser. He watched as he returned to her car, rummaged through the glove box, and then, clear as day in 4K resolution, reached into his own vest, pulled out the baggie, and slid it under the seat. Nadia paused the video right at that frame. The image of Bryce's hand planting the evidence was frozen, indisputable. "That was not a technical issue, Harlan," she said softly. "That was a felony." Bryce's defense mechanisms kicked in. Denial, deflection. "It looks bad, I know, but I saw her. I saw you reaching for something. I panicked. I just wanted to make sure a dangerous suspect did not walk." "Stop!" Nadia cut him off, her voice like a whip. "Do not insult my intelligence, and do not insult the badge." She stood up and walked around the desk, leaning against the edge, towering over him. "I could fire you right now. I could hand this tape to the district attorney. You would be in prison by dinner time. General population. We both know how cops fare in general population, do we not?" Bryce paled. He knew he had put enough people in there who would love 5 minutes alone with him. "Please," he choked out. "I have a family, my pension." "You did not care about my family or my career last night," she reminded him. "But I am not you, Harlan. I do not operate on impulse." She walked to the window, looking out at the rain. "If I fire you now, the union will fight it. They will claim entrapment. They will claim I had a vendetta. It will be a long, drawn-out legal battle, and you might even get to keep your pension while you sit at home." She turned back to him, her eyes hard. "I do not want you to just lose your job, Harlan. I want to break the system that created you. I want to know who else is doing this. I want to know who taught you." Bryce swallowed hard. She was fishing for Brock. She wanted the sergeant. "I work alone," Bryce lied. "We will see," Nadia said. "Here is what is going to happen. You are stripped of your patrol duties effective immediately. You are turning in your gun and your badge. You are suspending me? No. A cruel smile played on her lips. I am reassigning you. You are now the precinct's records custodian. You will spend your shifts in the basement archive, digitizing arrest reports from years past to the present. Alone. No partner, no cruiser, just you and the dust. Bryce stared at her. The basement was a dungeon. It was where careers went to die. And Ryder, she leaned in close, I am opening a formal internal affairs investigation into every single arrest you have ever made. If I find one more planted baggie, one more coerced confession, I will not just fire you. I will personally walk you into the cell block and lock the door. She pointed to the door. Get out of my sight. Report to the basement. Bryce stood up, his legs feeling like jelly. He stumbled toward the door. As he reached for the handle, Nadia spoke one last time. Oh, and Harlan, the baking powder. You can take it with you. You might need it to bake a cake for your farewell party. Bryce fled the office. He walked past the bullpen, heads turning to watch his walk of shame. He did not look at anyone. He went to his locker, stripped off his patrol belt, his vest, and unpinned his badge. He felt naked without the weight of the gun on his hip. He slammed the locker shut, grabbed a box, and headed for the stairs down to the basement. But as he descended into the dark, musty archives, fear began to curdle into something else. Anger. Pure, hot, white resentment. She had humiliated him. She had taken his power. She thinks she has won, Bryce thought, the darkness of the basement wrapping around him. But she does not know who she is dealing with. I am not going down alone. A few days later, the basement of the 4th Precinct felt less like an office and more like a tomb. The fluorescent lights buzzed with a headache-inducing frequency, and the air was thick with the smell of mildew and paper. Bryce sat at a rusted metal desk surrounded by towers of cardboard boxes filled with arrest reports. Scan, save, next. Scan, save, issue next. It was torture. He was a man of action, a hunter. Now, he was a librarian. His phone buzzed on the desk. It was Sergeant Elias Brock. Meet me at O'Reilly's. Come alone. That evening, the rain was falling again, washing the grime of the city into the gutters. O'Reilly's was a cop bar a few blocks from the station, dark, smoky, and loud enough to cover a conversation. Bryce walked in wearing civilian clothes, a hoodie, and jeans. He felt like a ghost. He spotted Brock in a back booth nursing a whiskey. Bryce slid into the seat opposite him. Brock looked tired. The bags under his eyes were heavy. How is the dungeon? Brock asked, not looking up. It is hell, Bryce spat. She checks in on me twice a day. She is auditing my logs. She is digging, Brock. She has pulled the files on the Johnson bust and the Hernandez case. Brock's hand tightened around his glass. The Hernandez case was a mess. They had skimmed $50,000 from a drug raid and split it. If Nadia found out about that, they were not just looking at firing. They were looking at years in federal prison. She is a menace, Brock grunted. Since she took over, the numbers are down. Morale is in the toilet. Everyone is walking on eggshells. We have to do something, Bryce hissed, leaning across the sticky table. She's not going to stop until she has our heads on a spike. She told me she wants to break the system. That means us, Sergeant. Brock took a long pull of his drink. He looked around the bar to ensure no one was listening. I did some digging on her. She's squeaky clean, top of her class, commended for bravery, volunteer work on weekends. She's a saint. Nobody is a saint, Bryce insisted. Everyone has a price. Everyone has a skeleton. Not her. Brock shook his head. Which means we have to give her one. Bryce's eyes narrowed. What are you thinking? Brock leaned in, his voice dropping to a whisper. There is a raid scheduled, a warehouse down by the docks. Intelligence says it is a distribution hub for the Latin kings. Big money, big weight. Captain Brooks is leading it herself. She wants to be on the ground to show she leads from the front. So Brock smiled, a nasty yellow-toothed expression. It would be a tragedy if the intel was wrong, or if something was found in her car while she was busy breaching the door. Bryce's heart started to pound. This was dangerous. This was crossing the line from corruption to treason against a fellow officer. But he remembered the way she looked at him in her office. The arrogance. The baking powder. "What do we plant?" Bryce asked. "Not drugs," Brock said. "Too cliché. Money, dirty money. I have a contact in the evidence locker. I can get a stack of marked bills from a previous bust. 50 grand. We plant it in her trunk. Then we call in an anonymous tip to Internal Affairs saying the new captain is shaking down dealers for protection money. And when they find the cash," Bryce whispered. "She is done," Brock finished. "Marked bills in her personal vehicle. She will not be able to talk her way out of that. She will be suspended pending investigation, and with the scandal, she will resign. We get our precinct back." It was a desperate plan, a reckless plan. But Bryce was a desperate man. "How do we get into her car?" Bryce asked. "She drives that Mercedes. It probably has an alarm system that talks to satellites. She leaves her keys in her office during tactical briefings," Brock said. "She changes into tactical gear in the locker room. Her office is empty for 10 minutes. You still have your key card for the admin wing, right? They did not deactivate it yet." Bryce nodded. "Good. During the briefing, I will create a distraction in the hallway to pull the admin staff away. You slip into her office, grab the keys, run to the garage, plant the bag, and get the keys back before she knows they are gone." Bryce stared at his hands. "If I get caught?" "You will not," Brock assured him. "She thinks you are broken. She thinks you are rotting in the basement. She will not be looking for you." Brock reached into his jacket pocket and slid a heavy brown paper package across the table under his menu. "Here's the package. 50 grand. Do not spend it," Brock joked darkly. Bryce took the package. It felt heavy. It felt like salvation. "That night," Bryce said. "That night," Brock agreed. "We take our house back." Bryce left the bar with the package tucked into his waistband. The rain had stopped, but the air was colder now. He felt a surge of adrenaline he had not felt since the night he pulled Nadia over. He was not the victim anymore. He was the aggressor. He went home to his small apartment, tossed the package on his bed, and cracked open a beer. He looked at himself in the mirror. He looked tired, but his eyes were alive again. "You wanted a war?" he thought. "You got one." He spent the next few days in the basement playing the part of the beaten dog. He kept his head down, did his scanning, and avoided eye contact. He saw Nadia once in the hallway. She did not even acknowledge him. She walked past him like he was furniture. Keep walking, he thought. Enjoy the view while it lasts. The day of the raid arrived with tension that vibrated through the precinct walls. The tactical team was gearing up. Rifles were being checked, vests strapped on. The air was thick with testosterone and focus. Bryce clocked out of his basement shift. He did not leave the building. He slipped into the janitor's closet on the second floor and waited. The intercom buzzed. All tactical units to the briefing room. Bryce cracked the door. The hallway was clearing out. He saw Nadia walk past wearing a heavy ballistic vest with police emblazoned on the chest. She looked fierce. She entered the briefing room, and the heavy door thudded shut. This was it. Bryce moved. He slipped down the hallway to the captain's office. He tried the handle. Locked. He swiped his keycard. The light blinked red. Damn it! She had deactivated his access. Panic flared in his chest. He looked around. Brock had said he would create a distraction. Where was it? Suddenly the fire alarm at the far end of the hall began to blare. Whoop, whoop, whoop! The few administrative assistants still at their desks jumped up and began moving toward the exits. Everyone out! Fire drill, "Move!" Brock's voice bellowed from down the hall. Chaos. Perfect. In the confusion, Bryce saw the admin assistant, a young woman named Clara, leave her desk. The master keyring for the floor was sitting right there on her blotter. Bryce lunged. He grabbed the master ring and ducked into the captain's office, unlocking it manually. He slipped inside and closed the door, his heart hammering against his ribs like a trapped bird. The office was dark. He scanned the desk. There, next to a framed photo of an elderly woman, were the keys to the Mercedes. He grabbed them. His hands were sweating so much he almost dropped them. He checked the hallway. Empty. The alarm was still blaring. He sprinted for the back stairwell that led to the secure garage. He took the steps 2 at a time. He burst into the garage. It was dimly lit. The SWAT van was idling, its engine rumbling, but the team was still upstairs. He found the charcoal gray Mercedes parked in the captain's spot. Click. The trunk popped open. Bryce looked around one last time. He threw the brown paper bag containing the $50,000 under the spare tire cover. He slammed the trunk shut. Done. He sprinted back up the stairs back to the office. He threw the keys onto the desk exactly where he found them. He wiped the keys with his sleeve to remove prints. He ran out, locked the door, tossed the master keys back onto Clara's desk, and blended into the crowd of people evacuating the building for the fire drill. He stood outside in the parking lot, breathing the cool night air. He saw Brock across the lot. Brock gave him a barely perceptible nod. Bryce smiled. It was over. Tonight, she would be arrested by her own people. But as Bryce stood there basking in his victory, he did not notice the small blinking red light of a micro camera hidden in the ventilation vent of the captain's office. And he certainly did not notice that the money in the bag he had just planted was not money at all. He had walked into a trap far more sophisticated than anything his mind could comprehend. The night of the raid bled into the following morning. Bryce Harlan did not sleep. He sat in his apartment, the blinds drawn, staring at the local news. The headline crawled across the bottom of the screen. Massive bust. 4th Precinct seizes millions in narcotics. On the screen, Captain Nadia Brooks stood at a podium flanked by the commissioner and the mayor. She looked tired but triumphant. She spoke about teamwork, about cleaning up the streets, about integrity. Integrity. Bryce scoffed at the TV, cracking his knuckles. Enjoy it, Captain. It is the last speech you will ever give. He picked up his burner phone, a cheap prepaid device he had bought with cash at a convenience store a few towns over. He dialed the number for the Internal Affairs Bureau's anonymous tip line. He had rehearsed what he was going to say a dozen times. Internal Affairs, a recorded voice answered. State your tip. I have information regarding high-level corruption in the 4th Precinct, Bryce said. His voice dropped to a rough rasp to disguise it. Captain Nadia Brooks. She is skimming off the top. She is taking protection money from the dealers she is supposed to be busting. Check the trunk of her personal vehicle. There is a package there right now. 50 grand payoff money. He hung up and destroyed the SIM card, flushing it down the toilet. The seed was planted. Now, he just had to wait for the harvest. The following morning at the precinct was strange. Usually after a big bust, the mood was celebratory. But today, the atmosphere was brittle. The air felt charged with static. Bryce walked in heading for his basement exile, but he lingered near the coffee station upstairs, hoping to see the fireworks. He did not have to wait long. 3 black sedans pulled up to the front of the station. 4 men and 2 women in sharp suits stepped out. They were not patrol. They were not detectives. They were the bogeymen of the police department. Internal Affairs. Leading them was Lieutenant Sterling, a man with a reputation for eating dirty cops for breakfast. He walked straight to the front desk. Where is Captain Brooks? Sterling demanded. In her office, sir, the desk sergeant stammered. Bryce watched from the corner, his heart pounding a victorious rhythm against his ribs. He caught Brock's eye across the room. Brock was sweating, wiping his forehead with a handkerchief, but he gave Bryce a subtle thumbs up. Sterling marched up the stairs, his team flanking him. Minutes later, the intercom crackled. All sworn personnel to the parking lot immediately. This was it. The public shaming. Bryce joined the stream of officers flowing out the back doors into the secure lot. The gray Mercedes was parked this hour, gleaming under the morning sun. Captain Brooks stood by the car. She looked calm, strangely calm. Lieutenant Sterling stood next to her, looking grim. "Captain Brooks," Sterling announced, his voice carrying over the crowd of officers. "We have received a credible tip alleging that you are in possession of illicit funds related to criminal enterprise. Do you consent to a search of your vehicle?" The precinct held its breath. This was the end. If she refused, she looked guilty. If she consented, she was dead. Nadia looked at the crowd. Her eyes found Bryce, but she did not look angry. She looked disappointed. "I have nothing to hide, Lieutenant," Nadia said clearly. "Here are the keys." She tossed the fob to Sterling. Bryce had to bite the inside of his cheek to stop from smiling. Boom. Sterling walked to the trunk. He pressed the release. The lid popped open. The officers craned their necks to see. Sterling reached in, moving the gym bag, the emergency kit. He froze. He pulled out the brown paper bag Bryce had planted. "Is this yours, Captain?" Sterling asked, holding it up. "I have never seen it before in my life," Nadia replied. "Open it!" someone from the back shouted. Sterling tore the top of the bag open. He reached in and pulled out a stack of bills, hundreds bound in rubber bands. A murmur rippled through the crowd. "Dirty money," someone whispered. "She is dirty." Bryce felt a rush of euphoria so strong he almost grew dizzy. He had done it. He had taken down the Queen. "Well, Captain," Sterling said, weighing the money in his hand, "this looks like 50,000 unaccounted for." "It certainly does," Nadia agreed. She took a step forward. "But before you put the cuffs on me, Lieutenant, I suggest you look at the serial numbers." Sterling paused. "Why?" "Because," Nadia said, her voice turning to steel, "that money did not come from a drug dealer. It came from the evidence locker of the 4th Precinct. Case number 492 Bravo, the Hernandez bust from 2 years ago." The color drained from Sergeant Elias Brock's face. That was his bust. That was the money he and Bryce had stolen from. And Nadia continued, turning to face the crowd. "I think you will find that the bag itself has a very interesting story to tell." She pulled a remote from her pocket and pointed it at the precinct wall where a large outdoor monitor, usually used for announcements, flickered to life. "Officer Harlan," Nadia said, "pay attention." On the screen, a high-definition video began to play. It was the interior of the captain's office. It was night. The fire alarm was blaring. The door opened. Bryce Harlan burst into the frame. He looked frantic. He grabbed the keys from the desk. He wiped them on his sleeve. The video cut to a second angle. The garage security camera. Bryce sprinting to the Mercedes, popping the trunk, throwing the bag inside, slamming it shut. The video cut back to the office, Bryce returning the keys, wiping the desk, running out. Silence. Absolute suffocating silence descended on the parking lot. Bryce felt his legs give out. The world tilted on its axis. He was not the hunter. He was the bait. "You see," Nadia said, her voice ringing out like a judge's gavel, "I knew there was a rat in my house. I just did not know how desperate he was. So I gave him an opening. I left my keys. I had a fire drill arranged. I let you hang yourself, Harlan." She turned to Lieutenant Sterling. "Lieutenant, I believe this constitutes probable cause for arrest." Sterling was not looking at Nadia anymore. He was looking at Bryce, and he looked furious. "Officer Bryce Harlan," Sterling barked, pointing a finger like a weapon. "Get over here now." Bryce could not move. He was paralyzed by the sudden, violent shift in reality. "And grab Sergeant Brock, too," Nadia added casually. "Since the money in the bag came from his private stash in the ceiling tiles of the evidence room, which we found this morning thanks to the serial numbers." Brock tried to run. He made it 2 steps before Officer Vance, Bryce's old partner, tackled him to the concrete. "It is over, Bryce. Nadia said, walking up to him. She stood toe-to-toe with him, just like she had that night in the rain. "You tried to frame a black woman because you thought I was weak," she whispered low enough that only he could hear. "You thought because of my gender and my race I was an easy target. You forgot one thing." "What?" Bryce choked, tears of terror welling in his eyes. "I'm not just a woman, she said, reaching for his handcuffs. "I am the captain." She spun him around and slammed him against the hood of her Mercedes, the very car he had targeted. "You have the right to remain silent," she recited, snapping the cuffs on tight. "I suggest you use it because you are going to be doing a lot of talking where you are going." The trial of Bryce Harlan and Sergeant Elias Brock was the biggest scandal to hit the Chicago Police Department in a decade. It was not just corruption. It was a hate crime disguised as police work. The media ate it up. Every night, Bryce's face was on the news, not as a hero, but as the face of everything wrong with the system. His defense attorney, a court-appointed lawyer named David Thorne, tried to cut a deal, but the district attorney was not interested. The evidence was overwhelming. The video of the traffic stop, the video of the office break-in, the testimony of the other officers who had turned on him to save their own skins. The courtroom was packed on the day of sentencing. Judge Donovan Reyes, a man known for his harsh sentences on public corruption cases, sat on the bench looking like a gargoyle carved from granite. Bryce stood. He had lost weight. His suit hung off him. He looked at the gallery. His girlfriend was not there. She had left him the day after the arrest. His friends were not there. The only person he recognized was Nadia Brooks sitting in the front row wearing her uniform, watching him with that same impenetrable expression. "Bryce Harlan," Judge Reyes intoned, his voice booming through the microphone. "You took an oath to protect and serve. Instead, you prayed and destroyed. You used your badge as a shield for your own bigotry and greed. You attempted to ruin the life of a superior officer, simply because you could not accept her authority." The judge paused, adjusting his glasses. "The court finds your actions not only criminal, but morally repugnant. On the charge of conspiracy to commit evidence tampering, guilty. On the charge of burglary, guilty. On the charge of official misconduct, guilty." Bryce closed his eyes. "I sentence you to 15 years in the Illinois Department of Corrections. You will not be eligible for parole for at least 12 years. Get him out of my sight." The gavel came down. Bang! It sounded like a gunshot. Bryce was dragged away, kicking and screaming. "I'm a cop. You cannot put me in there. They will kill me. I am a cop." But nobody listened. A few months later, Stateville Correctional Center is a hard place. It smells of bleach, sweat, and fear. For a former police officer, it is a death sentence waiting to happen. Bryce Harlan, inmate number 492000, walked into the general population yard. He had spent the first month in protective custody, but budget cuts meant he had been moved. He kept his head down, clutching his tray of slop. He found an empty table in the corner. He sat down, his hands shaking. He just wanted to eat and get back to his cell. "Hey, officer." A voice rumbled behind him. Bryce froze. He knew that voice. He turned slowly. Standing there was a massive man, 6'4", with tattoos covering his neck and arms. It was Jamal Big Harris. Bryce had arrested him years ago. He had planted a gun on him to ensure the conviction stuck. Jamal had missed the birth of his daughter because of Bryce. "Jamal," Bryce whispered. Look, man, I was just following orders. Orders? Jamal smiled, but it did not reach his eyes. He sat down opposite Bryce. Two other men flanked him. You know, Bryce, life is funny. Karma, they call it. It is a wheel. It turns. Jamal leaned in. You used to run the streets. You used to decide who walked and who got locked up. You decided my life for me. I can help you, Bryce pleaded, desperation clawing at his throat. I know things. I can get you an appeal. I do not need an appeal, Jamal said. I get out next week. My time is done. But you got 15 years, Harlan. 15 years in my house. Jamal stood up. He did not hit Bryce. He did not need to. He just knocked Bryce's tray onto the floor. The mashed potatoes splattered against Bryce's shoes. Clean it up, officer, Jamal commanded. The yard went silent. Everyone was watching. The Aryans, the kings, the vice lords. They were all watching the cop. Bryce looked at the mess on the floor. He looked at Jamal. He realized with a sinking horror that went down to his soul that his badge could not save him here. His gun was gone. His authority was a ghost. Slowly, painfully, Bryce Harlan got down on his knees. He began to scrape the food up with his bare hands. Laughter erupted in the yard. It was not joyful laughter. It was cruel, mocking laughter. It was the sound of power shifting. Back in the city, the sun was shining. Captain Nadia Brooks walked out of the precinct. She got into her charcoal gray Mercedes. She checked her dash cam out of habit and pulled out into traffic. She drove past the spot on Western Avenue where she had been pulled over that rainy night. She slowed down for a second, looking at the underpass. She did not smile. She did not gloat. She just nodded, a silent acknowledgement of the justice of the universe. She signaled, checked her blind spot, and drove on. She had work to do, a city to protect, and she was going to do it right. As for Bryce Harlan, he was finally learning the one lesson he refused to learn on the outside. When you dig a grave for someone else, you better dig too. And that is the story of how Officer Bryce Harlan found out the hard way that the badge does not make you a god and karma does not miss. He thought he was setting a trap for a victim, but he walked right into the lion's den. It is a powerful reminder that integrity always wins in the end, and true strength is not about bullying. It is about standing your ground. Some lessons don't arrive as gentle advice. They arrive as a storm, a betrayal, and a hard, unforgettable consequence. In this story, Officer Bryce Harlan thinks a badge makes him a god. He hunts for vulnerability, plants evidence, laughs at a woman in handcuffs, and calls her just another stat. But Nadia Brooks is not broken by his cruelty. She is calm, watchful, and prepared. And when she walks into that precinct wearing a captain's white shirt, the entire room learns the real truth. Power without integrity is not strength. It's a countdown to collapse. The most valuable life lesson here is this. Character is what you do when you believe nobody can stop you. Bryce's downfall isn't caused by bad luck. It's caused by habits, small, corrupt choices repeated until they become his identity. And when he tries to set a second trap, planting dirty money to destroy her, he discovers something that applies to every part of life. Truth leaves footprints, a camera, a receipt, a pattern, a witness, a timeline. You can silence a person for a night, but you can't silence evidence forever. Eventually the wheel turns, and the same system you abused will turn its gears on you. For the audience, this isn't only a story about karma. It's a reminder to live clean, speak carefully, and build your life in a way you won't be ashamed to replay on screen. And if you are the one being targeted, remember Nadia's lesson. Stay steady, document everything, and don't let someone else's hate steal your dignity. Now I want to hear from you. Have you ever seen someone abuse power and finally face consequences? Or have you ever been underestimated and proved people wrong? Share your story in the comments. And if you want more powerful stories with real-life lessons like this, subscribe to the channel and turn on notifications so you don't miss the next one.